It's a real honor to be here today with all of you. And I'd like to share a story with you. First great love of my life was my grandmother. Her name was Rose, and she was as beautiful as her name. The love that she had for me was as lush and rich and beautiful as any rose you could imagine. And she and my grandfather created a foundation for me, and in their love, there was so much warmth and comfort and safety, and we were rich. But you can see from this photo with my grandfather, we also lived in the projects. We lived in the North Dallas projects, not too far from here. And as a kid, I didn't know we were poor. We had food. We had our church, which was in walking distance. We had our family there. We had our community and friends. And so for me, it was a very rich, wonderful way to begin my life. And things changed. My grandparents were fortunate enough to buy a home, and when they did and left the projects, life was very different for my mother, my sister, and me. And this was a very dark time as a child. It was a very chaotic, frightening time, a loss of safety, a loss of grounding, a loss of security. And I imagine for many of you, your childhood concerns were, how soon could you finish your homework and go play outside, or would you get to have dessert for dinner? And I'd like to invite you into what my world was like as far back as maybe 7 or 8 that I could recall, where my concerns as a 7-year-old girl were, would we eat that day? And when would we eat? When would the people from the government bring the box of food? Or when would the Sunshine Committee from our church drop off our box of food? Where would we sleep that night? Would I know the people? Would they be nice people? Would I be able to find my way to the bathroom in the dark? Would I remember how to find the kitchen? Was I allowed to get food from their fridge if I got hungry at night? And if I closed my eyes and let myself go to sleep, would I be safe that night? Imagine changing your elementary school 6 times. And each time I'd walk in wondering if the teacher was nice. Should I try to make friends? Would I even be there long enough to find a best friend? When we moved, Mother would walk me to school the first day. And after school, as a little kid, I was responsible for remembering the way home. And I can remember panicking when I would forget how to get to our new place. Would I get home before the sun went down? Or how do you decide which house is a friendly house to knock on the door to ask for help? So at that point in my life, I had no path. I had no one to tell me where my life was going to go. And what I did as a resourceful little kid is I realized my survival was my responsibility, and I better figure it out fast. And so I learned to read the room, read adults, read the situation, so I knew when to hide and when to perform. And I got really good at performing. And I had a pair of tennis shoes back then that I loved. One toe had left on it and the other toe had right. And I was a smart kid. I knew my left from right. But as I was creating my path, step by step by step, I always looked down when I walked when I was a little girl. And the only assurance I had was with each step, I could be sure at least I knew I was going left or right. And so I used that performance to create a path for myself. In middle school, I was fortunate enough to attend a classical academy where we learned 5 languages. We also spent 2 years learning gymnastics and ballet, which is a wonderful way to perform, a wonderful way for me to be present in my body and express beauty. And it was a wonderful way to achieve, which brought me safety. Everybody loves a kid who achieves. Everybody loves a star. And the most important thing that I learned during that time was the cue. Every performer, every dancer in here knows the cue. You know when it's time to perform. And that became my mantra for the next 30 years before I walked out the door. It was 5, 6, 7, 8. It's time to perform. And I did. And it got me out of that situation, got me through college, medical school, several successful practices. I had made it. One thing that my grandmother Rose made me promise was that when I started to make money, I would buy a fast red car. And I think she also meant for it to be powerful and fun. So I did it. And I love every day that I drive my car. I love it because my grandmother Rose is right there with me. And my crowning achievement, I raised 2 children, a stable home, 2 houses their whole lives, 2 parents who love them, and they're both college graduates, one of whom, my beloved daughter Camille, is also a physician. So I had made it. I was a bona fide success, and I had everything that could prove it. But the reality was, I had used those things bit by bit to create my armor, chink by chink. And so with every badge, every doctor badge, every graduation, I felt safer and safer because I wasn't a poor girl from the projects. I was a protected class now. I could not be disrespected. I could not be ignored. I couldn't be forgotten. I was safe as long as people knew I was a physician. And that armor, building that safety, was very important. I recognize it and I honor it because I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't created that as a girl. But I also recognize it was heavy. And it was unbearable. And I got curious about my life. I wondered, what was I protecting? What was inside? So this is me, right? There is strength and there is grace, but it was so contorted. It was unrecognizable. And what I could hear from my grandmother Rose and my ancestors was, this is not it. This is not what we sacrificed for. We are pleased with your success. This is not it. And so I looked for an exit of this prison I created for myself to keep myself safe, but I looked for an exit. And here it is. Got an opportunity to grow from changing lives one exam room at a time to working with a community. As my introducer, Christopher Crow, explained, I became part of the organization at Catalyst, and my role was to expand primary health care to communities that were underserved and had been overlooked. And we're talking about my neighborhoods, where I grew up. This is noble, right? And so I realized where I am on my hero's journey, I am the hero returning home with my gifts, and I knew my community would have a parade for me. I could see the parade. I could hear the band. I could see the majorettes twirling the batons, and I could see the dancers. They would be pirouetting and strutting in my honor. I was back to save my community with my professional and my personal gifts. But there was no parade. In fact, what my community said is, we're not interested in your performing. And your performance really isn't all that convincing. But we are interested in inviting you to have a seat and learn and listen. My community said to me, think about who you were at 7 or 8. Think about what your family needed. Did you need somebody just to come and help you? Or did you need someone to listen to you and your family and understand what would really make an impact? Did you need a savior who arrived with a solution that was created without you as a partner? A ready-made solution? Did you need a savior, or did you need someone to address structural inequities? Did you think you were inferior, incapable? Then why do you think we are? And this is not what I expected. I was the hero returning home. And so this is where I find myself many days, actually in the valley. And sometimes it feels like the valley of death. And it's dark. Sometimes I don't clearly see the path. Sometimes I don't even experience the light. And it's destabilizing. It's disorienting for someone who's lived and succeeded by achieving and creating my path. But it is also where I am convinced I am supposed to be. Because this is where my change happens. Not on the mountaintop when I can feel the sun on my face and there's glory. This is where the change happens. And I can't create a shortcut. There's no shortcut. This is where I need to be. And there are days when it's light, and it's like a dance, dark to light. And the days when it's light, I very clearly experience my grandmother Rose and my ancestors saying, this is it. This is what we sacrificed for. This is why we endured unimaginable horrors. This place where you learn who you are and why you are really here. And that brings me comfort. That is the light that I carry, that they give me. And there are days when it's back in the dark. And on those days, the light that I bring with me is the community that walks alongside me. They are people like my beloved daughter, Camille, who has invited me to be in her life, not as her overachieving perfectionist mom, but as a woman and a friend. I have support from friends who have been with me since we were in medical school together, 20, 30-year relationships. There are people in the room, Kevin, my coaches, Coach Chris, Coach Wes, Rand, people like Dr. Sylvia Trent Adams for my ILP, the guys from Camelot Media, and recognizing my strength my community leads me back into the light. And the most important source of light beyond my ancestors, my family, my community is the 7-year-old girl that I always have with me. And while I am fiercely committed to shedding my armor, I am just as committed to protecting her. Because I recognize that that 7-year-old girl represents not just me, but millions of 7-year-old girls who right now are choreographing their own path. Thank you.